What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. It's good to see you guys here. And shout out to the two people who liked this video before we even came on the air. That's the kind of fans I need in my world right there. I look and there's like 18 people watching and two thumbs up, and we hadn't even started yet. And I'm not sure if that means that I'm better when I'm not talking or if I'm better when I am. I don't know. I'm not sure what that says. That may not be good now that I think about it. So we're going to be talking about cables and wireless. I don't know what the plural for wireless is. The montage of fiddles. Yeah, that thing's cool. And it's all that music actually that you're listening to is all some of my stuff. Some of it I wrote for the violin shop because we needed some material. But yeah, it stops us from having to worry about copyright infringement if you just use your own music. Actually, I was doing a live stream on my personal Facebook one time, and I was playing some pre-roll music, and it was one of my songs. And Facebook shut down my live stream because they were like, yeah, that's copyrighted music. I know. It's mine. So, yeah, thank you for looking out for me, I think. But, yeah. Anyway, we're cables. I'm off topic. I'm sorry. Cables and wirelesses is what we're going to be talking about today. So, this may be aimed more at people that are sort of new to the world of amplifying. If you're super experienced in this area, you may not learn a whole lot here, but you can fact check me, and that's always important. It's always good to have people out there like, I'm not sure what you said is true. So yeah, if I say something that's not true or your experience is different, chime in. Be like, hey, I really like your shirt, but what you said doesn't jive with my experience. So, yeah. So yeah, if I say something that doesn't sound right to you, say, hey, what was that? Yes, wireless systems. We will be talking about those in a little bit. The subject matter's got me excited. That's why I'm bouncy today. Actually, I just released a single last night, which I'm very excited about because I'm on the goal to do this once a month. And it's always, by the time the 15th hits, man, that pressure starts weighing on them shoulders. You're like, gosh, I'm halfway through the month and I'm not halfway done yet. So, yes, I'm happy today because I got my song out. So, yes. Let's go here. Okay, so cables. We've got to connect the instrument. If you're playing electrified, which you should be, you got to connect the cable to something, either to your effects board or to the PA or to an amp or something to make you loud, because loud is good. So you got to connect the instrument to the PA somehow. And generally there's going to be cables involved. So we're going to have to know stuff about cables. So let's talk about cables. Those of you who are new to this business, you're like, yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of cables. And we get the question all the time about, well, is there like a special violin cable? No, there is no special violin cable. But we're going to talk about the kind of cables that there are right now. So, boom. All right. I'm going to go this way so I'm not standing in front of my thing. So the very plainest kind of cable that you're going to deal with generally is a 1/4 inch cable. If you're not in the US and you don't know what an inch is, 6.3 millimeters. So 6.3 millimeter cable or 1/4 inch cable, sometimes called a guitar cable or an instrument cable. It's all the same thing. So you've got a picture right there on your screen. That is what the 1/4 inch cable looks like. Okay. Pretty simple. All right. So they come in different lengths. They come in different qualities. You can buy cheap cables or, maybe $6 or $8. You can buy very expensive cables. They're $100 or more. Is there a difference? Yes, there's absolutely a difference. Is the audience in like a little dive bar in Fred, Texas on a Friday night playing through a PV sound system, are they going to be able to tell the difference? No, they're not going to care. In your studio, if you're plugging into like a Manley 2B-Lop compressor and a nice preamp and all that, are you going to hear the difference in the studio? Yeah, very much. You can very much hear the difference between a good cable and a bad cable in the studio. Live, I like durable cables because you know the worst kind of cable, a broken cable, and cables do break. So yeah, live I like durable cables. In the studio, yeah, you can spend a little money on a cable, and you really can hear the difference. If it makes that big a difference, it's probably like I'm not recording any platinum selling records here, so I don't know if it really matters if I've got $1,000 worth of cables or $200 worth of cables. It's probably not where I'm going to spend all my money, but I'm not going to use the ultra cheapies in my studio. And I don't like the ultra cheapies live either. I think just a reasonable, you know, $25 cable. It's plenty. It's plenty. I do like the ones with the metal ends. Like this one has rubber jackets on it. I like the ones with metal. Personally, I like the ones with metal just because it's more durable. Studio recording, cable or wireless? Good question, Ernesto. Yeah, cable, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So there are two different kinds of cables on the screen right now. The one on the bottom, you can see you've got the long shaft and then the tip, and there's one insulating ring on there. That is a mono cable. You've got a hot line and a dead line in there, right? The one above it, you see it has two black insulating rings. That's a stereo cable. That actually has 3 wires inside there. And that is also referred to as a tip ring sleeve, TRS. So on the right-hand side, you see the tip. There's a ring in the middle and then sleeve at the bottom. So TRS, tip ring sleeve. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as a TRS or a stereo cable. So you want to make sure if you're plugging in your violin, the bottom one is the one you want. That's just a standard mono cable. You don't want a stereo cable for plugging in your violin. In theory, it should work, but we never try to make things more complicated than they need to be. So just a mono cable is what you need for plugging in your violin, okay? All right, so the next one, you can see you've got your regular guitar size cable there, the 1/4 inch or the 6.3 millimeter, and then you see the little mini jack next to it. That's an 1/8 inch or a 3.5 millimeter for you metric people, or sometimes they'll call it a mini jack, or sometimes they'll call it a headphone jack. We got lots of words for these things because we like to confuse people who don't do this for a living. So 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter mini or headphone, that's the bottom one that you're seeing there. And it's the one that if you've got a cell phone, if you have like a really old cell phone that still has a headphone jack, that's the kind that you would plug into your cell phone. You will occasionally see an instrument that uses that. We do okay, so let's grab show and tell time. So generally the output jack, oh, it's so hard because this video is not in reverse. This is going to be a 1/4 inch, and this is the output that comes to the amp. This goes to your amp or your PA system or whatever. If you see an 1/8 inch jack on a violin that costs more than $500, that's going to be a headphone jack. Like the Bridge Dragons come with a headphone jack. There's a headphone amp inside this thing. It's hiding in here. It's not rattling. That's good. So yeah, you can see the little cheap eBay violins occasionally will have an 1/8 inch jack out that they're thinking, hey, this is going to be my main output. Yeah, I would skip that violin. So Bridge has it. The NS Design CR series. Gosh, I can't do this and not reverse. There's your main output that goes to the amp, and this is a headphone output. Okay. Yamaha, the silent violin, the SV250, only has an 1/8 inch output, and it's actually stereo. It is a stereo jack, and that goes to your control box because it's an active violin, and they have to power that circuit. So there's signal coming down one wire and power going back the other. That's muy importante, very important. So if you see a cable like the one here, you got a 1/4 inch, that's a mono 1/4 inch going to a stereo 1/8. That should confuse you a little bit, and it should concern you a little bit. Like if I'm going to plug this into something, I got mono on one end and stereo on the other, that could be an issue for me. So you want to make sure they do make cables like this, and there are reasons for cables like that. But if you're just getting started and you're like, hey, I see a cable like this, unless there's a really good reason to have, that's probably not great. That's probably not the greatest thing. Oh, Mark Shapiro, you like the Evolution shirt? My wife actually sells those, believe it or not. If you hit me up, I'll get you a link. All right, so this one, here's an interesting one where we've got tip ring sleeve on the bottom. And then, so that's stereo. And then you can see the other two, they're different colors, and they're both mono. That's an insert cable. So we've got it's got stereo on one end and dual mono on the other. And the reason you would use those is if you're, let me hold that thought. I should grab this before. I'm sorry. If you got an LR bags, down here it says effects loop. Effects loop. And there's only one jack. You're like, how's it a loop if it only has one jack? This makes no sense to me. Well, you would have an insert cable like this. So in the insert cable, the stereo end goes in here. And then, so it comes out with one cable and then it splits to two cables. That's send and return. The most common is tip send. So you'll see on the picture there, you can see the orange cable. It says ring. On the gray cable, you can't see it's underneath, but it'll say tip. Tip send is the most common setup. So usually, and it's not always, which is the annoying thing about this, but usually the tip is going to be the send and the ring is going to be the return. So you would plug the stereo end into your bags, and then when it Ys out to those two mono cables, one would go in the input of the pedal, one would go in the output of the pedal, and then it comes back to here. So you've got a signal going down the wire and coming back the wire at the same time, which it can do because there's 3 conductors in there. You got positive, negative, and ground, okay? So that is a crazy kind of cable that if you're new to this, you may not have seen one of those before. Now you know, the more you know. All right, so there's also, you'll hear a 90-degree or a right angle cable. And that is, there's really no difference at all functionally for that. It's just, do you like having the cable sticking out the instrument, or do you like it to kind of hide away like that? A lot of these right angle, a lot of these will have, there will be a right angle on one end and a straight jack on the other, so you can just decide which end you want to go which way. And it just depends on the geometry of the jack on your instrument, where it is, how you like it to hang. If you like the instrument, you like the cable sticking out like that, or do you like it sticking out like that? It's purely personal preference. There's no difference whatsoever in the functionality of that. Just however you like it, you can have it your way. All right, I'm doing a lot of pointing today. What's that about? So that is another detail on cables I thought you should be aware of. My first pickup that I got on a violin, because I didn't know any better, had an RCA jack on it. Those are usually awful. And it sounded bad too, which I'm really glad it sounded bad, because I abandoned ship pretty fast on that and immediately bought a Viper, which changed my life very much for the better. So part of me is very thankful that that first pickup sounded like doo-doo. But it had an RCA jack on it. And the reason that I guess they used an RCA jack on that is that they're smaller and they're lighter. I guess we're worried about what stuff weighs. I'm a 200-pound dude. I can hold up a jack, okay. But there's, so you may see like that cable here, there's a 1/4 inch on top and that's called RCA on the bottom. And it's a strange little cable. If you've got, the reason I don't like RCA cables is that nobody uses them. So if you're on tour and your cable goes bad, because you know what cables do? They go bad. If your cable goes bad, you're like, hey, I need another cable. And you jump into your bag, or the sound guy has an extra one, or the guitar player has an extra one. We sort of help each other out. We're friends. Nobody's going to have an RCA to 1/4 inch cable because nobody uses these things. It's not that it's inherently bad. It's just it's uncommon. So the reason because it's uncommon, nobody's going to have a spare laying around. And I just, there's enough crazy stuff going on the road. We like to keep stuff as uniform as possible, 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch. We've got 1,000 of them on the truck. If one of yours goes bad, just grab one of those. Using all these crazy, weird 2 connector end cables, it's garbage. It's just, it's not that there's anything inherently wrong with it. It's just that nobody uses it. So spares are not going to be readily available. Okay. Next one, XLR or a mic cable. And if you want to stump a sound man, ask him what XLR stands for. Like nobody knows. Actually, there's a lot of debate about what it stands for. There was something about like X Canon is the company, like Canon was a company, and it was like the X, and then it's latch and rubber because there's a latch on the cable and there's a rubber grommet on there. That was the most common reason. I Googled it. I've been using XLR cables for 25 years and I had no idea what XLR meant. So I Googled it and it turns out that nobody else knows either. People think they know. They don't know. So XLR or a mic cable, it's one of these. You have to check. The most common XLR cable is a 3-pin cable. There's probably 100 of these for every one of the other kind. But occasionally you'll see a 4-pin or a 5-pin XLR cable. It's really crazy. You probably wouldn't ever use one in a sound application. Sometimes they'll use them in lighting or for data transfer. But yeah, you just don't be super surprised if you do see a 5-pin XLR cable at some point. It's not a museum piece. People do use them for stuff. They're relatively rare in the sound business. But yeah, so that's the XLR cable. That's what goes to front of house. So you've got a 1/4 inch coming out of your instrument, and then they're like, okay, we got to convert this to XLR. That's what you'll use a DI box for. And this is a DI box, right? So you've got 1/4 inch input. Is that input? That's the output. Of course it is. Input here, and then your output here, XLR, goes to front of house. XLR to 1/4 inch converter. Yeah, it is handy to have one of those. You just got to be a little bit smart about where you use it because impedances can be really different and you can get yourself in a big mess if you're connecting something 1/4 inch that's expecting a different impedance. But yeah, it's not, we called them rocket ships, right? Because it looked like it's got XLR on one end and then it comes down to a female 1/4 inch on the other. And it looks like a little rocket ship. So that's what we called them, rocket ships. It could be a little confusing when you look at these because we talk about male and female ends of cables. And if you need help understanding that concept, you can call the shop and ask for Shauna. She will explain that to you. Shauna's here. She'll explain the difference between a male end and a female end on the cable and why we call it that. But it can be a little confusing because I look at this and like the one on the top, it looks like it goes inside something, but then it's also it receives the 3 pins. So is that male, female? What is it? That's the male one. So it actually, the overall jack is what we're talking about. So the top one in this picture, the one that's closest to me right now, that's the male end, and the other one's the female end. Even though it's got pins in it, you're like, hey, I'm confused. Don't be confused. That one actually receives the other cable, so it's the female, and the one that goes in is the male. Okay. If that's still confusing, you can call and ask for Shauna, and she'll explain it to you. All right, so that's cables. Got a lot of cables, right? The cool thing about cables, the not so cool about cables suck. I hate cables. Cables are so awful. They're all over the floor. They're like in your way. You're standing on them. You're trying to move around. Cables suck. And the scary thing about playing a violin, the thing's up over your arm, right? It's on your shoulder. So you're playing. If I step back and I step on that cable, I'm going to yank the violin right out of my hand. That's bad. Yanking violins out of your hand is bad. It's actually good for electric violin shop because we can sell you another violin because that one's smashed. But yeah, it's not good if you're on the gig and you step on the cable and all of a sudden your violin's in 30 pieces on the floor behind you. That's bad, okay? So we like wirelesses. Oh, the other thing, if you're really active on stage, like I am, I'm sure you would have never guessed that I'm active on stage. Uh, in the comments, Shauna cannot wait to talk about male to female explanations. And I'm sure in her next live stream, she's going to pay me back for that. She's gonna send all the Zeta people to me. Yeah, the thing about, like, I'm an active guy on stage, which you might have guessed from the naturally caffeinated atmosphere here. And there's more than one active person on stage, which is always a bonus. We're going to end up tied in knots if we've got cables up here and we're both running around the stage. So a wireless is fantastic. I can go further than I can with a cable, because say I got a 15-foot cable. You know how far I can go? 15 feet or less. So if I've got a wireless, I'm free. I can go anywhere I want to go until the wireless runs out of signal. But that's usually, 100 feet. So that's the, excellent question, Lance. That's something I had not remembered to teach, but I will be teaching that momentarily. So we like wirelesses, okay? The wireless allows me to be free. And I can run around and I can make a fool out of myself, and that's part of what keeps me getting paid. So the wireless is fantastic. So let's talk about wirelesses. Everybody asks here all the time, hey, can I get a Bluetooth violin? And can I get Bluetooth headphones? Bluetooth is no bueno. It's a very different technology without getting into the coding behind it. Bluetooth is very different from wireless. Okay, so Bluetooth is a thing like goes to your phone. Generally, it's a relatively short throw. It doesn't go that far, and latency is insane. Should we avoid coiled cables like the plague? It turns out people don't actually avoid the plague. It's a horrible analogy. We got to quit using that. So the latency actually means the delay between when I play a note and when it arrives at its destination. We like things to be at the speed of light, which is mucho fasto. Speed of light's real fast. Like fast enough we can't perceive. It can go around the world and back faster than we can perceive how long that took. Sound isn't quite like that, and Bluetooth is slow like sound is. Your standard Bluetooth connection is roughly 200 milliseconds, which is 0.2 of a second, which is an eternity if you're trying to play in time with somebody. So standard Bluetooth could be 200 milliseconds or more. I've seen some Bluetooth connections up around 1,000 milliseconds, like a second from the time you play the note till the time it arrives at the speaker. That's awful. And then they go, well, we got low latency Bluetooth. Look at us. We got low latency. Yeah, the low latency stuff is more like 40 milliseconds, which is still minimum. 40 milliseconds minimum, which is a really long time. It's a really long time. And so the way you can sort of tell this, sound travels through air at roughly 1 foot per millisecond. So think about being 40 feet away from somebody, and like if you're watching a drummer and you're 40 feet away from them, there is a slightly noticeable lag from the time you see their hand hit the snare drum and when you hear it. It's paka, paka. You can see it and hear it. 40 milliseconds you can detect relatively easily. Think about further than that, because 40 is the minimum. The low latency stuff is usually more like 100 milliseconds. If you're 100 feet away from somebody and you see that drum, you see them hit that drum, and then you hear it, pow, pow, like that dog won't hunt. You can't be playing with Bluetooth like that. That's no good. Your drummer's going to murder you. So the other issue with Bluetooth is it's a lossy algorithm. So the way they're able to get data to transmit on Bluetooth is that they actually reduce the amount of samples, and it's by like 2/3. So it's a relatively lossy algorithm for transmitting sound, and you're going to lose sound quality. And if you're a terrible player, maybe that's a good thing. But if you're a good player, that's bad. We don't want to be losing signal quality. So Bluetooth is right out. Bluetooth, no good, not a good thing. Wireless is different. Wireless actually uses radio transmitters, which is different. The latency on wireless is the speed of light. So I mean, when I say measurable, depends on who's measuring, but you and I are not able to measure the latency in standard radio wireless. It is like, it's fast. So some of the old analog systems, and I'll see people that still have some of these old analog systems, most of which are illegal now because the federal government has sold off a lot of that bandwidth. But if you still have one that's hidden around somewhere and you're using it, they actually use data compression. Or they don't use data compression. They use compression, volume compression to send those signals over an analog waveform. And then they have to expand that on the other end. So it's companding. It's compression and expansion, which is also lossy. So it turns out that I had an old wireless back in the days when I was but a puppy. I had an old wireless. I actually really liked it, the analog wireless, because it knocked a little bit of the bite out of my violin. This is before I had figured out that you can dial back the volume knob on a Barbera pickup and sweeten it up a little bit. When I was using this old analog wireless system, it actually sweetened up the sound of my violin a little bit. And I thought, oh, man, it actually sounds better than it did. Yeah, it's because it's knocking off some of the highs, and it's knocking off some of the bite through that companding algorithm. I never had a Samson. I had some of the, a lot of people are using those Samson airline wirelesses, the little bud style things. Whew, those things, you can definitely hear them. There's definitely a difference between the sound of those little airline things and a cable. A lot of people, believe it or not, actually like that sound because it does. It knocks some of the bite out of the violin through companding is how it does that. And because it's an analog signal, it is susceptible to interference. If you're down near the water, I like to live near the coast because I like water. I'm a redhead. I don't lay out on the beach. That's just silly. But I do like living near water, and boats are the worst, man. Boats send out a ton of RF noise. And if you're near the water and you're using an old analog wireless system, be prepared to have some interference because it's not a secure signal. It just, any of that, they use a really wide bandwidth too. They have to. So any boats transmitting with their radios or something could be stepping on your frequency, and your receiver doesn't know the difference between the boat transmitter and your transmitter and noise. Okay, so then they started coming out with digital systems. The old digital and some of the super cheap digital systems today, they actually have to convert your signal. It's an A to D converter, an analog to digital converter in the transmitter, and then there's a digital to analog converter in the receiver. Those A to D and D to A converters in the cheap and the old systems are slow. It's got to do some math, and they're not that good at math. It takes them a minute. So there is a latency, and it could be significant. It could be 20 to 40 milliseconds, which is a lot. So some of those old digital systems did have some latency. Now, the nice thing about digital is it's more secure. It actually uses a much smaller bandwidth. It doesn't get stomped on as easy because we're sending zeros and ones, and it's much harder to confuse zeros and ones than it is decimals. But the newer digital systems, the latency is gone. They're super secure. Basically, you're either getting signal or you're not getting signal. Not getting signal is bad, okay? But getting signal is good, and if you've got signal, you've got signal. It's good signal. The quicker A to D converters, you're not able to measure with standard devices. You're not able to measure any latency that matters at all. In fact, in most of the brochures that they put out, the technical data, it'll say latency NA. It's not applicable. There's not any appreciable latency here at all. So there are a couple different types of wirelesses. I got one sitting here. You see the Line 6 G30. We sell these. Cool little pack thing, right? This can go on your belt. Or you can attach this underneath the violin. Sometimes people use Velcro. Sometimes they'll duct tape this thing to a shoulder rest or something. Gaff tape is way more rock and roll. But you can attach this to the violin or the shoulder rest or your clothing somehow. You can just hang it right here. It'd look really cool. Hey, everybody, play violin. So you've got this little transmitter. All of a sudden, there's no cable going to the floor anymore. You're not going to trip over a cable. And that's glorious. However, I play Viper, so I got a strap on my instrument. I don't really care. I'll clip this thing on the strap and I'm good to go. But most of y'all don't play a violin with a strap on it. So this thing, even though it's small, still kind of stinks. So there is a Bud style. And this is what the Bud style wireless looks like. This is a Line 6 G10. Boss also makes one, I think WL20 or 50. Those are both, I think those are both actually, WL20 and the WL50. Very, very similar to these. And this just sticks into your jack and then you're off to the races. Look at that. No pack, no nothing. If you're a woman and you don't always have a belt on, say you're wearing a dress or something, having a belt pack is not ideal. So the Bud style is nice, especially, I don't think we don't have one hanging out, but some of these instruments, this just basically just disappears right into the instrument. And it's pretty nice. So the nice thing about the pack actually will have more power. The Bud is going to be smaller. And I talk about isolated here. You see more and less isolated. What I mean is all the transmitting electronics in this are going to be basically touching your violin. Okay, so that's right next to all the electronics in the violin. This thing is probably not going to be touching the violin. It's at least going to be a couple inches away. Even if you're putting it on your shoulder rest or something, you're a few inches away from the electronics in your violin. Why does that matter? Because sometimes with some active violins, like the Yamaha SV200, for example, or sometimes the Cantinis or the Glasser violins, we can get interference. Because the electronics inside that violin do throw a little bit of a magnetic signal out. It's very, very small. The field is very, very small. An inch or two is about all this magnetic signal does. But if the transmitter is inside that inch or two, you can get this squeak. It's annoying, isn't it? It's even more annoying if it's coming through your speaker. So you can get that squeak with this thing, you're less likely to get with this. So if you're playing a Glasser or you're playing an SV200 or something, we actually recommend this. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a pain to try to stick it somewhere, but it's less annoying than squeak. All right, so that's what I mean when I say isolated, more or less isolated. All right, and let me put this back. Put it into the charger. This break brought to you by Cookout. So, cables suck. Did I mention that? The Cremona Piezos, David, are passive, so you would not have that problem. You won't have that problem with a passive pickup. You'll only have that problem if the violin itself is active. And it's not all active violins. In fact, I mentioned the Cantinis. Some Cantinis, I can hear a bit of a squeeze. Some of them I cannot. And it's he's done a really good job of shielding inside there. Sometimes with the some Cantinis, the shielding is good. It's good enough to protect your G10 from that. Some of them, if there's just a little crack or something in that shielding inside there, and by shielding I mean like literally like aluminum foil. If for some reason the aluminum foils isn't exactly flat or perfect or whatever in there, then you will hear a little bit of a squeak. So cables suck. What do they suck? They suck tone. A long cable will actually suck tone out of your violin. And again, it's like those old analog wirelesses. It's mostly highs that they suck out. So if you want to lose a little bit of the highs, you can use a long cable. Kind of cool. And the break point is, believe it or not, it's about 18 and a half feet. Past 18 and a half feet, you can actually very much hear the tone suck out of your tone. But that's 18.5 feet total. So if I've got a 15-foot cable going from my violin to my pedal board, and then I've got a 15-foot cable running from my pedal board to my amp, that's, carry the one, okay, that's 30 feet. So that's more than 18.5. So you're definitely losing tone if you're doing that. However, if you use buffered pedals, that helps, and we won't get into what buffers are. It's enough science for today. But if you have buffered pedals, like all Boss pedals are buffered, I don't remember if all the Electro-Harmonix pedals are or not. But if there's buffered pedals in there, that definitely helps. But think about the cable length from the violin to the pedal board. How many cables there are in the pedal board. Some of y'all got some crazy looking pedal boards out there. You probably got 20 feet of cables inside your pedal board. And then another 10 or 15 feet to the amp or whatever. Add all those up. If it's more than 18.5 feet and you don't have buffered pedals in there, that's no good. It can definitely affect your tone. So the thing is, maybe we like a little bit of that tone suck. Sometimes, and that's the thing, some people will say, like with my old analog wireless system, I actually kind of like the fact that it knocks a little bit of the highs out. So when you have a wireless unit like the Line 6 G10S, there's a switch on the back, and it's a cable tone simulator. And it will actually intentionally model what happens if you use either no cable simulation. I think maybe it's 10 feet and 20 feet, or I forget what it says on the back of there. I'll have to look. The Line 6 G10, not the G10S, the G10, I think it's either 10 feet or 15 feet that it just automatically, it assumes that you want cable suck and that you want either 10 or 15 feet of, they call it cable tone simulation. But it's a little bit of tone suck. So, but that's the thing. People want their guitar, I want it to sound just like the cable. And they're like, yeah, the problem is our wireless doesn't sound just like a cable. So we can make it sound just like a cable by sucking a little bit of the tone out. And you suck it out the same way a 10 or a 15-foot cable does. Good question, Justin. I'll get to you real quick. So the other piece that can actually affect your tone, and to me would affect your tone even more, not necessarily the length of the cable, it's the impedance on a wireless. Those of you who are big-time preamp warriors out there, I'm not one of those guys. I can't say never. I actually briefly did tour with a preamp, and it was a giant pain in the rear. If you plug, it's for impedance purposes, it's the very first thing that you plug your violin into that matters. So if you plug into a wireless and then that runs to a preamp, the preamp does color your tone some, but you've given away all the impedance benefit. And if you don't know what impedance is, we have videos for that. I'm not going to get into it. So from an impedance standpoint, if you're using a preamp for an impedance purpose, and you're going violin, cable, preamp, and that gives you the tone that you want. When you put a wireless into that system, you lose the benefit from an impedance standpoint, not from a tone sculpting standpoint, but from an impedance standpoint, you lose the benefit of the preamp. So that is probably the biggest, for most people, that'd probably be the biggest effect of using a wireless. I've seen people go so far as I got a little battery-powered preamp, and I'm going to put that in my pocket, and I'm going to run a wire to the preamp, and then run a wire to my wireless. And I'm like, we just totally defeated the purpose of a wireless to me, which is for things to be easy. But, everybody's got to do what they got to do. So what was the question? Justin, I'll get to yours in just a second. Somebody had asked about something else. La, la, la. Oh, yeah. Coiling cables. Let me do that first. So people are asking about coiling a cable. See how nice this looks? Not nice. Lays nice and flat. And my cable does not have this dreaded pigtail that gets into it over time. When you roll a cable out and it's got that pigtail kink in it. If you roll a cable properly, it won't do that. If you roll a cable improperly, your sound guy's going to slug you. But if you just roll, put in a twist and then put in a twist, and you just keep twisting like this and rolling your cable, And if you're one of those insane people that rolls it around your elbow, I don't even want to talk to you. But yeah, if you just do the little quarter turn, all the same direction, you're going to eventually, because you keep putting that twist in the cable, you're eventually going to end up with the pigtail in your cable. And that's bad, okay? So the way we avoid that, in fact, this thing just pigtailed as I threw it on the floor. It's crazy. So we roll, so I'm going to show you. You roll out this way, and then the next time you actually roll under. It's called the over-under method, and it is the proper way to roll a cable. So over, it's a quarter turn this way, and then the next one is a quarter turn the other way. This over-under method, and I've got a video on this. If you go to Electric Violin Shop page on YouTube, you can just search for cables, and it's a really good. Did I just flip my hair and say really good? That's crazy. It's a really good video. I think it's really good because I did it, but it explains how to roll a cable properly. And if you ever want to have a job in the sound business, you learn how to roll a cable properly. I taught my 10-year-old how to roll a cable back when he was 10, and that kid will always be able to get a job somewhere because he knows how to roll a cable. And he doesn't look like me. So yeah, that's how you roll a cable properly. Justin's question: what do you do if you hear a buzz while using cables or wireless? Well, it depends on what kind of buzz I'm hearing. If it's a 60 hertz hum, say we're in the U.S. and our electricity is at 60 hertz here, it's going to be sort of zzz. You got a grounding issue somewhere. And it could be an issue with the cable. It could be an issue with the instrument. It could be an issue with the amp. It could be an issue with the power in the building. It's one of those things that there's a large number of things that could cause that. You're just going to have to sort of chase them down one after another. It's hard to troubleshoot unless I'm there, but and this is really awful advice, but we all take it. You can use what's called a ground lift. And it's one of those things that you got your 3-prong plug for plugging. In the United States, we use what we call an Edison plug. And it's got the 2 little vertical connections and the one in the bottom. It looks like a guy who's just like constantly surprised, right? You got your 2 verticals. And so the 3-prong Edison plug that we use to plug into the wall, you'll see an adapter that's got 2 prongs going into the wall. It's got 3 prongs coming in and 2 prongs going out, and then there's like a little loop at the bottom. It's called a ground lift. You can use that, and it will stop your amp from humming. They're dangerous as crap. You can get electrocuted by doing that because you've basically removed your amp from the grounding in the building. And if you're standing and you're grounded somewhere and you touch that amp and it's not, the electricity has to find a way to even itself out, and it's just going to use you because you're a conductor. I always wanted to be a conductor. Woo woo! So yes, you are a conductor, and if your amp decides that it does in fact need to be grounded, it might just use you to ground itself, and that'd be bad. So yes, you can do it. We all do it. It's dangerous. It's really not ideal. And if OSHA finds out you're doing that, they're going to be most dissatisfied with you. Of course, they're probably not super excited about most of the things we do on stage. But anyway, that answers the question about a buzz. The bad advice is to use a ground lift. And I will say, do not take that advice. But everybody takes that advice. Okay, so we've talked about wirelesses. Oh, gosh, that's the last slide I have. Oh, my goodness. So let's do this. Let's plug in one of these violins. If you guys, we're going to attempt to hear a little bit of cable tone suck. How about that? I'm going to plug in a violin, and we're going to go with no cable tone simulation, and then we'll go with maximum cable tone simulation, and we'll see if you guys can hear the difference. So I've got my trusty dusty G10S right here. I'm going to plug it into this beautiful MSI violin. Aren't these nice? I really do like this violin a lot. So I think right now I am on 0 feet of cable. So the wireless system has not added what it believes to be any tone suck. This is just... think I got you dialed in a little hot. Let's. I just saw my overload light just came on. Let's try this. Okay, that's no cable tone. This is 30 feet of simulated cable. So I think I hear just a little bit of highs out of there. Maybe I'm imagining it because I threw the switch, but I'm not sure how much of it I notice in the room. When I'm wearing in-ears, I can way hear it. There's one venue that my band used to play at a lot, and I think I just got booked back into that venue, unfortunately, where they've got a huge, and so let me talk about this. These wirelesses, here's the downside of these. They use 2.4 gigahertz. That's the frequencies that they use to transmit. Guess what else lives at 2.4 gigahertz? Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi lives in that 2.4 gigahertz range, and occasionally you will find yourself with just a banging Wi-Fi transmitter somewhere, and it's going to interfere with your Line 6 wireless devices. The only way to get away from that is to go to some of the ultra high dollar stuff, the $800 or $1,000 wireless things that are, lunch, that are transmitting in something other than 2.4 gigahertz. And they tend to be pretty expensive. So if you're doing a lot of events where I cannot have dropouts and there's tons of Wi-Fi in here, you're going to have to spend some money. I know it sucks, but that's how it is. And they don't have any little bud transmitters. You're going to have to go with a pack. Is what it is. Anyway, this place that I've played a bunch of times, you can't use the Line 6 wireless in there. We had like 10 of them on stage, and mine, for whatever reason, was the one that just absolutely did not work in that place. No matter what channel I tried, it did not work. So I have to use a cable in this place. And for whatever reason, the spare cable that I had in my case was like a 25-foot cable. I don't know why I threw that cable in there, but I did. And I felt all night like I was physically having to ram my signal down that cable. And it felt dull. It felt dead. It felt unresponsive. In my in-ears, I could totally hear it. And I'm asking my sound guy, who's an amazing sound engineer. His ears are incredible. I asked him, I'm like, did you notice a huge difference in my tone? He said, no, I mean, a little bit. He said, I knew you were using a cable, so I just bumped your highs a little bit. He said, that pretty much, that's all I got. Now, to me, it felt like an insanely huge difference with in-ears in. I mean, the driver is 1/10 of an inch from your eardrum. You can hear everything. It was a miserable night because I felt like the whole responsiveness just felt sluggish and awful. So that's the difference a cable can make. I don't know if I heard a huge difference here. Maybe you guys could if you're listening, because that was mostly a direct signal. Lance is asking, I recently had a Voodoo Labs pedal board switched from wireless cable. Yeah, I've got a volume knob or a volume pedal in my rig, and if I need to switch, I just shut the volume pedal off. And I always have a cable laying near me on stage just in case. As I'm unpacking stuff and setting up, I always keep a cable. I keep it actually underneath one of the cymbal stands for my drummer, so it's always there. And in fact, my bandmates have had to use it more often than I have, but hey, it's there. If I'm using wireless, I always have a cable nearby. And my peak of touring, I was doing 150 to 200 shows a year. I would have to use that cable about once a year. So it's relatively rare. In fact, that one time a year was almost always at this one venue. Apart from that one venue, like pretty much never. Lines, knock on whatever, Line 6 wirelesses just work for me. There are, the other thing is too, if you are one of those people like my wife or the guy that was the singer in my band, Jordan, that we call these people walking EMPs. They're just an electromagnetic pulse. Around them, electronics just don't work. My friend Jordan would actually, we had a distro paddle for our in-ear wirelesses, and it would usually be on the far side of the stage, on the other side of him from me. And anybody else in the band could go between me and this distro paddle, didn't affect my in-ears at all. If Jordan would step between me and that paddle, my ears would cut out. This dude just has an aura that around him, electronics, they don't work. I mean, it's the thing that could be the most bulletproof piece of electronics you have. You could loan it to him for a month and you would get it back and it wouldn't work anymore. And you're like, what'd you do to it? He's like, I just used it. There's something up. There are some people, and I swear it's a thing. I don't know if science has ever proven this, but there's something about these people. My wife can walk under a street light and they'll go out at night. She's got this. Yes, I don't know. I don't know. But so there are certain people that have these auras. And if you're one of those people, you may be one of those people that wireless just doesn't work that great for. And I've heard of a couple of them. They've said, man, every wireless I've tried just didn't work. And I tried the G10 and it never worked. I'm like, I have literally played a G10 all over the world and it always works, except for this one place in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. I have played these things literally all over the world. I have never had consistent problems with them. And there are people that are like, nope, I've never been able to get it to work. It always cuts in and out. I don't know. Some of those people just apparently have an aura that wireless doesn't like. It's relatively rare. I can think of maybe a half a dozen of these people. But yeah, that's the deal. So, gosh, 55 minutes. This has been a lot of fun. So if you guys have questions, chunk them in there. If not, then we're going to call it a Wednesday. Hopefully this has been educational for you guys. It's been helpful. Learn about a bunch of different kinds of cables. We've talked a little bit about wireless. Yeah. I guess I could dance while I'm waiting for questions. No question? All right. If you guys have questions about other stuff, you can always hit our YouTube. Here is our YouTube page. You go to youtube.com/Electric Violin Shop. There are tons and tons of videos in there about everything and nothing all in all. You can always go to our website. You can buy stuff there because that's what websites are for. They're for buying stuff, and it helps keeps the lights on here because if the lights are not on, these videos are going to be really dark. And that's the only reason to buy things. You come for the jokes. Wow. Somebody's bored. Sorry about that. So yeah, electricviolinshop.com if you want to buy any of this beautiful stuff. The G10S had never had a problem, Melody. It was the G10. I think it was the G10S did not have a problem. The G10 did, and they fixed it. In fact, if you have a G10 and you bought it a while ago, there is a firmware update, and you can just hook it up to your computer and go to line6.com and download the new firmware for that, and it'll update your wireless, and it will not have the problem anymore. It was actually a problem. It was a little bit like those Samsung phones. It would overheat. And it was, when I say it would overheat, they'd sold, 1 million of these things, and I think 2 of them overheated. But yeah. Okay, sending a mono signal out of the ME80, is it better to go to a DI or directly into a board? Always to a DI. Always to a DI. Yeah, I would definitely. If it is even remotely an option, I would go to a DI and then into the board with 1/4 inch. And it has to do with the way those boards are wired on the inside, what kind of signal they are expecting. Yeah, if you can go, which one's better, XVive? Good question. XVive or Boss WL20? I have not toured extensively with either one. It's just what I have experienced in a room. To me, they both pretty much sound the same. You know what they sound like? Nothing. You don't hear it. You don't hear the wireless. You just hear your instrument. So I don't know whether one transmits further than the other, or it charges faster or holds a charge longer. I don't know, but I know there are people I respect who tour with both of those. People who tour with the XV, people who tour with the WL20, they've been happy with them. So, yeah, to the best of my knowledge, they're more or less compatible. There may be a couple of tech specs where one of the nerds who reads all the tech specs, like me, is going to look and say, hey, it was this one's better for this reason or that. Yeah, the WL50 is a great little wireless. It can't compete with the G10S. The G10S actually has a number of features that are better than the WL50. I'd say the WL50 is better than the G10, and the G10S is better than the WL50 as far as feature set and all that. But yeah, going from a G10 to a WL50 is a good move. And if you get a chance later on and you want to go from WL50 to a G10S, that's going to be a good move too. I guess nobody wanted to see me dance anymore. The questions came in. That's good. That's why I have to be in a band, because I can't dance. So, all right. Well, that's it. I will see you guys next week. Thanks for hanging out. If you've got ideas for topics, you can always dump those in the comments section too. I got to come up with these once a week, so I'm open to ideas. Oh, and go check out my new single, please. You can find on my YouTube channel, Matt Bell Violinist. Hope you dig it. All right. See you guys next time.